a sage, because I know him, I felt him, I never met him before. He's written many books on Vedas, Upanishads, a wonderful, wonderful realized soul, and he has Guru Kripa, so everything comes easy for him, and he has done tireless efforts to help the humanity with his books and his teachings. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce him to you. Please, Nanda Anandaji.
Hare Krishna. Anyway, it's very nice to be here. And of course, everybody, it's very fortunate to be here during this time when we have the installation of Shri Radha Krishna going on, getting ready for next Sunday. What I wanted to do tonight was to describe the holy Dham of Shri Krishna and the means by which we can all understand how to go back to the holy Dham. Because obviously that's a very important point of spiritual life, is so that we can actually become free from the material impediments of being encased in one of these bodies and in material life, and actually go, okay, whatever you'd like. And how we can actually go back to our real nature, which is our spiritual nature, and go back to the holy Dham and to associate with the pastimes of Lord Krishna, Radha, Govinda together, so that we can actually basically go back home, back to our real position. So anyway, I've got a few parts of the presentation to read to you, so I don't mess up, because they're quotes, specific quotes from shastra, to give everybody the idea of exactly how the descriptions of the spiritual abode of Lord Krishna are described. So, anyway, the Vedic text describe that there are innumerable spiritual planets beyond the material creation, each having unlimited forms, or one of the unlimited forms of the countless forms of the Lord. Namely, in the Vaikuntha planets, Vaikuntha, of course, means a place where there is no anxiety. In the material world, it's a place of kunta, plenty of anxiety, plenty of things to worry about. So, in the center of that spiritual abode of Vaikuntha is the planet known as Krishna Loka, or Goloka Vrindavan. This is the personal abode of the original Supreme Lord, or Sri Krishna. And Krishna enjoys his transcendental bliss in multiple forms on that planet. And all the opulences of the other Vaikuntha planets are also found in this particular abode. So before I go on, can everybody understand my English all right? Okay, I'm not going too fast for you? I remember when I'm in India, I always ask that, so I can adjust, People say, oh, my original trips to India, they had a harder time understanding me, but now, after 10 years of touring in India and giving lectures, I've talked in a way where people can seem to understand me a little more clearly, but I always ask that. But in any case, the planet of Goloka Vrindavan is shaped like a lotus flower. And many kinds of pastimes are always taking place on each leaf of that lotus, as described in the Brahma Samhitas, which is the Brahma Samhita verses 2 and 4. And that describes it this way, and I quote, "The super excellent station of Krishna, which is known as Gokula, has thousands of petals and a corolla like that of a lotus sprouted from a part of his infinitary aspect, and the whirl of the leaves being the actual abode of Lord Krishna. So the whirl of that eternal realm, Gokula, is the hexagonal abode of Lord Krishna. And its petals are the abodes of the gopis and friends who are part and parcel of Krishna, to whom they are most lovingly devoted and are similar in essence." In other words, the spiritual quality is all the same between all the residents of the spiritual world. Not the quantity, you have to remember, but the quality of the spiritual nature is all the same. So in that abode, the petals shine beautifully like so many walls, and the extended leaves of that lotus are the garden-like dham, or spiritual abode of Sri Radhika, the most beloved of Lord Krishna. End quote. So the only business that Krishna has in the spiritual world is transcendental enjoyment. In other words, he doesn't have anything else to do. Even in his maintaining this material world, he expands as Lord Vishnu. Don't you ever feel like that sometimes? You wish you had an expansion of yourself so that you could do what you wanted and your expansion could do the office work or the technical work, things like that. Well, that's actually, we get that idea from Lord Krishna, actually. So, the point of it is, the more enjoyment the devotees offer to Krishna, the happier he becomes. And the happier Krishna becomes, the more his devotees become enlivened and taste eternal happiness and transcendental ecstasy. So, in this way, there is an ever-increasing competition of spiritual ecstasy between Krishna and his parts and parcels. This is the only business in the spiritual world as described in the Brahma Samhita, and that is verse 6, where it says, "The Lord of Gokula is the transcendental supreme Godhead, the only self of eternal ecstasies. He is superior to all superiors and is busily engaged in the enjoyments of the transcendental realm and has no association with his mundane potency." End quote. So though it is not possible to experience spiritual pastimes or to see the form of the Supreme with ordinary senses, we can see the forms of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna as the deities in the temple. And then, by spiritualizing our consciousness, we can then begin to see the forms of Lord Krishna all the time. So we are especially fortunate because we have the forms of the Lord right over there. And as they become installed, we'll be able to use these mundane senses to see the forms of the Lord in the temple, especially by the practice of devotional yoga, which is called Bhakti Yoga. We can reach that platform of perceiving the Supreme at every moment. So at the time we start becoming Krishna conscious and can begin to enter into the pastimes of Krishna, although we may still be situated in this material body, we can do that through the process of Bhakti Yoga. So in other words, many people feel that in order to have a truly spiritual existence, they have to leave this body behind. In other words, they feel they have to die. But actually, through the process of devotional yoga, you can do that right here, right now, in this body, before you die. You actually can enter into that consciousness, because it's the consciousness which makes the difference as to how progressed or how you perceive the spiritual dimension. Remember one thing. If this is all you get out of this talk, remember this one thing, and that is, the more spiritual you become, the more you can perceive that which is spiritual. The more spiritual you become, the more you begin to enter into the spiritual dimension. And the more the spiritual dimension begins to open itself or reveal itself to you. That is the whole purpose of the yoga process. And in this case, we're talking about especially devotional yoga or Bhakti Yoga. So if we become fully spiritualized in this manner, there is no doubt that when we give up this material body, we will return to the spiritual world. Until then, we can continue to worship the deity of their lordships, Sri Sri Radha and Krishna, and studying the Vedic texts to remember and be conversant about the beauty and loveliness of the spiritual world, as described as follows. Now this quote is from the Gautamiya Tantra, verse 4, and it describes like this. It says, "Vrindavan Dham is a place of ever-increasing joy. Flowers and fruits of all seasons grow there, and that transcendental land is full of the sweet sound of various birds. All directions resound with the humming of bumblebees, and it is served with cool breezes and waters of the Jamuna River." Those that you have been to Vrindavan, you know that the Vrindavan River goes right by it. So Vrindavan is decorated. Now we're talking not only about, just the Vrindavan in India, but we're talking about the spiritual world of Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual sky. So It says, Vrindavan is decorated with wish-fulfilling trees, wound with the creepers and beautiful flowers. Its divine beauty is ornamented with the pollen of red, blue, and white lotuses. The ground is made of jewels whose dazzling glory is equal to a myriad of suns rising in the sky at one time. On that ground is a garden of desire trees, which always shower divine love. In other words, even the trees are always showering divine love throughout the whole land. And when the birds are singing, they're singing the divine love of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. When the bees are buzzing, they're buzzing with the divine love of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. On that ground, let's see, in that garden is a jeweled temple whose pinnacle is made of rubies. It is decorated with various jewels so it remains brilliantly effulgent through all seasons of the year. The temple is beautified with bright-colored canopies glittering with various gems and endowed with ruby-decorated coverings and jeweled gateways and arches. Its splendor is equal to millions of suns, and it is eternally free from the 6 waves of material misery. The 6 waves of material misery include hunger, thirst, disease. Of course, there's others like anger, jealousy, envy. None of that exists in this spiritual realm. Only pure love exists in the spiritual realm. Of course, that is also why Krishna is usually called blue. You know why Krishna is blue? Because that is the color of pure consciousness. And that pure consciousness consists of unconditional love. That is why Krishna is considered the God of love. Out of all the Vedic divinities, there is no divinity that loves more than Krishna. He receives your loves and he gives back your love more than anybody else. So that's why Krishna is the bluish color, because that is the color of unconditional love for whoever and from whatever background a person may come from. So in that golden throne inlaid with many jewels is the way one should meditate on the divine realm of the Supreme Lord, Sri Vrindavan Dham. End quote. But also from the Brahma Samhita, we also find out that, and he describes, this is from Lord Brahma actually, and he describes, I worship that transcendental seat known as Shvetadvip, whereas loving consorts, the Lakshmis, in their unalloyed spiritual essence, practice the amorous service of the Supreme Lord Krishna as their only lover. Where every tree is a transcendental purpose tree, in other words, it gives you whatever you want. Where the soil is the purpose gem, water is nectar, every word is a song, every gate is a dance, and the flute is the favorite attendant. You know, Krishna's always playing his flute, right? He's the favorite attendant. And effulgence is full of transcendental bliss. In other words, the light in the spiritual Dham itself is thick with transcendental bliss. You cannot escape it. That's why only a chosen few ever hear about this Dham, they ever know about this Dham, and only a chosen few ever get to actually meditate, as we are right now, on this Dham. Because all these descriptions basically are a form of meditation. We're meditating on the Dham just by hearing about it like this. So it goes on to say that where numberless milch cows always emit transcendental oceans of milk, where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, who is ever present and without past or future, and hence is not subject to the quality of passing away, even for the duration of half a moment. That realm is known as Goloka, only to a very few self-realized souls in this world. And that, of course, once again, is from the Brahma Samhita. So by studying and hearing about the beauty of this supreme world, then we will understand that everything that we are looking for is actually from our real home in the spiritual world. And everything that we are looking for originates from that spiritual home. There, as it is described, one finds freedom from all pains and suffering, and the atmosphere is unlimitedly full of ever-expanding beauty, joy, happiness, knowledge, and eternal loving relationships. Now, isn't that interesting? Because basically, what are we looking for? Everybody's ultimately looking for happiness, but what is the highest level of happiness? In a loving relationship. Everybody's ultimately, when people are looking for happiness, they're really looking for love. That's what it comes down to. Everybody wants to love and be loved. And so everybody wants to have a wife, a husband, children, because that will give them that ever-expanding love, or so they think. Sometimes it works out nice, but still the point of it is no one can love you as much as the supreme lover, who is Krishna. Exactly. So you're catching on very quickly. Of course, I know you already know this. Everybody here actually already knows this. I'm just giving you like a refresher course, you might say. But anyway, in that realm, no one has the difficulties of maintaining a material body because everyone has spiritual forms. So it is a world full of recreation only, without the struggle for maintaining our existence. There is never any hunger, and we can feast and never get full. Neither is there any lamentation over the past or fear of the future. It is said that time is conspicuous by its absence. Thus, the needs of the soul for complete freedom and unbounded love and happiness are found in the spiritual atmosphere. That, obviously, is our real home. So, another text called the Gopala Tapani Upanishad, which is about Gopal or Krishna, obviously, is quite clear on this point and naturally has numerous verses that explain the nature of the absolute truth and Lord Krishna. A few of such verses include the following. Now I'm going to skip around some of the verses, but they're from the first chapter and verse 3, 10, 22, and 17. So this explains it this way. It says, Brahma, with his full awareness, emphatically said, Sri Krishna is the supreme divinity. He who meditates on Sri Krishna serves him with an unalloyed devotion and makes his transcendental senses gratified by engaging one's own spiritual senses, we're talking spiritual senses now, in rendering service to him. All of them become immortal and attain the summum bonum, or perfection of life. Of course, the whole point of it is, as we engage our senses in the service of Krishna, they become spiritualized. The consciousness becomes spiritualized, so that we actually begin to enter into the spiritual domain right here and now. So he who meditates on Sri Krishna serves him with unalloyed devotion, and Sri Krishna is that supreme divinity as the paramount eternal reality among all other sentient beings, and the fountain source, a second, but as a super soul, as a fountain source of consciousness to all conscious beings. He is the only reality without a second, but as a super soul dwelling in the cave of the hearts of all beings, he rewards them in accordance with their respective actions in life. Those men of intuitive wisdom who serve him with loving devotion surely attain the highest perfection of life, whereas those who do not do so never gain this highest beatitude of their lives. This Sri Krishna, who is most dear to you all, is the cause of all causes. He is the efficient cause of the creation of the universe, as well as the superintending force for propelling the jiva souls, which are all of us. In other words, he is the basis of our life, just as a fire is the basis for the heat that comes from a spark. Therefore, although he is the enjoyer as well as the Lord of all sacrifices, he is ever Atmarama, or self-satisfied. End quote. So this is further corroborated in the Katha Upanishad, wherein it says, and this is Book 2, Chapter 3, verses 8 and 9, it says, Beyond the Brahma Jyoti, or the Nirguna, or formless Brahman, there is the great Purusha, or the Purushottama God, who is all-pervading and without any empirical attributes, but having Satchidananda, transcendental embodiment. He who realizes this Purushottama, Tattva, or the energy of the Supreme Lord in this way, is finally liberated. Attaining a spiritual body, he renders eternal service to the Supreme Being. And the transcendental personality of Godhead is beyond the purview of occult vision. But he can be apprehended through a pure, transparent mind imbibed with intuitive wisdom born out of unalloyed devotional practice in the very core of one's own unstinted heart or purified heart. Those who have really got such a vision have gained final beatitude, end quote. So even Lord Krishna himself says something similar, where he quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who know perfectly this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. And that's from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 8. So how do we understand God? Now we understand a little bit about his holy Dham, the spiritual abode. We have a few descriptions of what Lord Krishna is like, which also should give you the idea of how fortunate you are to be having the forms of Radha and Krishna established in this temple. Because you have to remember, well, I'm going to get to that in a minute before I go on any further. Let me just come to that as we proceed. So sometimes people say they want to see God, or that God is not perceivable. You think that's true? How many think that's true? Nobody? Okay, I'm in very good company then. So, and this is confirmed in the Vedic scripture, but with additional points of instruction on how we can perceive the Supreme Being. So God is always perceivable, but you have to have the consciousness that allows you to perceive that divine realm. Because in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, this is chapter 4, verse 20, it explains, his form of beauty is imperceptible to mundane senses. No one can see him with material eyes. Only those who realize through deep, pure-hearted meditation this Supreme Personality who resides in everyone's heart can attain such liberation, end quote. So the point of it is, Krishna Lila or his pastimes are eternally going on in the spiritual world, whereas they appear to be happening only at certain times or certain points in time in the material energy. However, one who has purified his or her consciousness can still witness these activities even while in the material body. So once again, this is all possible right here, right now, in these bodies that we temporarily reside in, because they're only temporary vehicles, if we carry out our activities of devotional yoga and understanding and meditating on the forms of Radha and Krishna. This can especially happen at the holy places, or dhams, where the spiritual and material energies overlap, and where the spiritual world appears within this material domain. Such places include Vrindavan, Mathura, Jagannath Puri, Dwarka, and now Pontiac. So we have to understand that Pontiac is not a holy dham, but now we have a holy dham within Pontiac. So So the point of it is, remember, as I was going to say a few minutes ago, is that this temple is like a bubble. When you enter this temple, you actually leave the material energy. If you enter this temple in the right consciousness, you leave the material energy behind and you actually enter the spiritual vibration, the spiritual domain, the spiritual atmosphere that everyone is hankering for. So we have to give some credence to Dr. Kumar for allowing us this facility and making it possible, and so that we take advantage of it. In other words, don't take it lightly. When you know this Dham exists, try to spend more time here, because this is the way you purify your consciousness. This is the way you begin to accustomize your consciousness spiritually, by leaving the material world behind and entering into the energy which enables us to perceive that which is spiritual. And like I said, only a few people of wisdom ever get to know this knowledge. In fact, it's explained that you have to do hundreds, if not thousands of lifetimes of pious activity before you even come in contact with books like the Bhagavad Purana. You have to undergo hundreds of lifetimes of pious activity before you even understand or come in contact with Krishna in the deity form or through shastra, scripture. So basically, all of you have undergone hundreds of lifetimes of pious activities to be here right now. So, don't make one lifetime spoiled by regressing and going backwards. Make sure you use this lifetime as well to keep going forward in your spiritual practice. So, when the Lord is pleased with your service, He can reveal Himself to you. And that's the whole point of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, many greatly elevated and pure devotees of Krishna have been able to have personal darshan of the Lord and witness His pastimes even while in the material body. Then they may leave instructions for the rest of us to follow so that we can do the same thing. This is verification that the process of devotion or Bhakti Yoga works. And this is basically what this class is. It's a meditation on which can be used in the process of Bhakti Yoga. So, since Krishna is the Supreme Being and source of all enjoyment, it is our best interest to engage in His service, for that will also connect us to Him and give us that great pleasure and bliss that we are always trying to find. So, people always try to seek out happiness and pleasure while not knowing that it ultimately comes from within. In other words, it simply has to be reawakened, awakened from within. You cannot get it from without. I mean, there's certainly many activities that provide tingling for the senses and occupation of the mind, but is that truly spiritual bliss or pleasure? It is like a sweet poison. It tastes so good while you're drinking it, but then once it gets into the bloodstream, the clock is ticking, tick, 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 and once that poison does its work, then you're kicked out of your body. And then what? So in the same way, the clock is ticking. We want to make sure that we're utilizing whatever time we have for as much spiritual advancement as possible, which is given to you in the form of the holy Dham of the Om Parashakti Temple and other temples throughout the Detroit area. But it's up to you to take advantage of the facility. So don't waste it. So, otherwise, it is like taking the endeavor to dig a deep well in search of water while residing next to a deep river. Does that make any sense, to dig a deep well when you're next to a river? So in the same way, happiness comes from within. You simply need to reawaken it. So you also need to take advantage of this. You're living next to the great river here of this temple, so we don't want to take it for granted. That is the point of devotional service called Bhakti Yoga, which is the process of connecting yoga with the Supreme through devotion or bhakti. In this way, our inherent loving propensity is directed towards the Supreme Lover. And who is that Supreme Lover? Krishna. Yeah. Exactly. So there's no better way of finding God than this. In other words, through the devotion, we do not try to see God, but we act in such a way that God sees us. That is the whole point of Bhakti Yoga. We do not work so hard to see God, but we simply act in a way that God sees us, and then He reveals Himself to us. That is the point. In other words, through devotion, God reveals Himself to us because it's that love that attracts Him to us. In other words, when we're engaged in loving devotion, when we're engaged in loving anybody, that's what attracts them to us. So the same thing works for God. So then everything is accomplished through this system. There can be no greater achievement in the human form of life than that. Everything else is temporary. It comes and goes. Only our spiritual achievements last eternally because they are connected with the immortal soul. Therefore, reawakening our relationship with the Supreme is the highest goal in human existence. This is the importance of meditating on the personal form of the deities of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. This is verified in Bhagavad Gita, where it says, 12:2, the Supreme Lord said, "He whose mind is fixed on my personal form, always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith, is considered by me to be the most perfect." End quote. So the key is explained directly by Lord Krishna himself when he says, and this is from the Bhagavad Purana, 2nd canto, he says, "Knowledge about me as described in the scriptures is very confidential, and it has to be realized in conjunction with devotional service." In other words, you can't be an armchair philosopher. You can't simply sit back, read books, and think you know everything, because that knowledge has to be awakened or enlivened by the action of bhakti, devotion. So he says, the necessary paraphernalia for that process is being explained by me. You may take it up carefully. All of me, namely my actual eternal form, my transcendental existence, color, qualities, and activities, let all be awakened within you by factual realization out of my causeless mercy. End quote. So that's the whole point. We understand Lord Krishna, we begin to understand his qualities by his mercy, by attracting him through the devotional process. Lord Krishna also says, however, that, and this is from Bhagavad Gita, "I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible." As Lord Krishna establishes the foundation for attaining the means to understand him, he also explains how to begin the process. And this is taken from the 11th canto of the Bhagavad Purana. He says, "Only by practicing unalloyed devotional service with full faith in me can one attain me, the Supreme Person. I am naturally dear to my devotees, who take me as the only goal of their loving service. By engaging in such pure devotional service, even the dog-eaters can purify themselves from the contamination of their low birth." End quote. So in other words, it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, everybody can take this process up naturally. So in the summary of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Sutta Goswami also explains the above point. Quote, and this is from the Bhagavatam, 12th canto, he says, "Remembrance of Lord Krishna's lotus feet destroys everything inauspicious and awards the greatest good fortune. It purifies the heart and bestows devotion for the Supreme Soul, along with knowledge enriched with realization and renunciation." So this is how it works. This is how we begin to understand Krishna and how Krishna begins to reveal himself to us. So now, herein also, Lord Krishna is speaking directly to us. And he says that if we follow through with this process, we will be successful even at the time of death, which is certainly the final test in life, whatever we may have done. In other words, remember, death itself is not going to give you some amazing realization. I mean, you're going to get many insights from it, but it's not the final goal. The insights and the progress that you need to acquire need to be done right here, right now, in this life. Death is only the test of how much progress you have made in this life. So this is what we need to understand. In other words, whatever progress we make towards self-realization has to be done right here, right now. We cannot wait for death thinking that that's going to be the goal and the ultimate destination or ultimate realization. Because there's many, I'm sure you know, that's still wandering through the subtle realm, whether they be hungry ghosts or whatever, that are still looking for the answers. So the answers have to be found, and they can be found right here, right now, in this particular lifetime. So anyway, this is the topmost process through which steady progress will bring us to spiritual awakening. This is further related by Lord Krishna in his instructions to Brahma, and this is in the Bhagavad Purana, 10th canto, where he says, by regularly hearing, chanting, and meditating on the beautiful topics of Lord Mukunda. Of course, Mukunda is Krishna. Mukunda means the one who gives liberation. So, the beautiful topics of Lord Mukunda with ever-increasing sincerity, a mortal being will attain the divine kingdom of the Lord, where the inviolable power of death holds no influence. For this purpose, many persons, including great kings, abandoned their mundane homes and took to the forest for performing spiritual pursuits. End quote. So here it becomes clear that for those who hear and chant the holy name and topics of Krishna, millions of grievous sinful reactions become immediately burned to ashes. Of course, the most important time for remembering the Lord and chanting his name is at the time of death. That is why it is said that those who chant Krishna, Krishna at the time the body expires becomes eligible for the ultimate stage of liberation. In conclusion, Lord Krishna simply explains that, thus I have explained to you the most confidential of all knowledge. Deliberate on this fully, and then do what you wish to do. In other words, this is no dogma that Krishna expects you to follow no matter what. He explains this knowledge to you and then says, ultimately it's up to you. Do as you like. Because love is not a forceful prospect. Love is not a forceful process. Love is something that you kindle on your own. You get to know somebody, you get to know the Lord, and it becomes automatic for anybody. So this is not some fierce dogma that's forced down your throat to be either saved or going to hell. It doesn't have anything to do with that. But he says, because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you the most confidential part of knowledge. Hear for this from me, for it is for your benefit. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So this is easy. Krishna is saying, just surrender to me. I will protect you. Do not worry. Now this is rather important because I'll tell you, when I go to India, I also come in contact with many different other religions besides Hinduism and the Vedic process, and they're all saying Hinduism. It is so complicated. How do you follow that? Why do you follow that? Just accept, Jesus or somebody else, because all you have to do is surrender to him. And then it becomes easy. But doesn't Krishna say the same thing right here? He's saying the same thing. Just surrender to me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. How easy can it get? So this is what we have to understand. And we have to know this knowledge. We have to know these books so that we can also understand what is our position and how easy that Vedic culture can be. It's not that complicated. You just have to know how to present it. And you just have to know, look, where the knowledge is. So how much more time do I have? So there's another meditation I was going to give you. This is from the instructions from Lord Shiva. This is very secret. I don't know if I can give it to you in 5 minutes, but Lord Shiva also, in his conversation with Narada Muni, he also gives the instruction that there are 2 mantras that you need to chant. And anybody can chant these mantras. And one mantra is Gopi Jana Vallabha Charno Sharnam Prapadye, which means I take shelter of the feet who is the gopis' beloved, namely Krishna. And he says the other mantra is Namo Gopi Jana Vallabha Bhyam, which means I offer my obeisances to the divine couple, Shri Shri Radha Krishna, who are dear to the gopis. So this is Lord Shiva's instructions to Narada Muni. And he says these mantras he has not even explained to his own wife, the goddess. He is only explaining it here. And this information is from the Sri Sanat Kumara Samhita, which is from the Skanda Purana. But then he explains the whole process of how to meditate on Sri Radha and Krishna when using these mantras. So he says, one with faith or without faith who chants these 5-word mantra resides among Lord Krishna's eternal consorts. But he says, use this mantra in this way, and this will be the last paragraph. He says, when you meditate on, you can use this mantra, and don't forget the other main mantra, which is many times prescribed, is of course the Hare Krishna mantra, which again everybody knows, everybody can participate in. You don't have to undergo purificatory processes or even initiation to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. But when you chant these mantras and you meditate like this, I meditate on the 2-armed Lord Krishna, who is dark like a monsoon cloud, dressed in yellow garments, garlanded with forest flowers, crowned with a peacock feather and garlanded with lotus whorls, whose face is splendid like 10 million moons, whose eyes move restlessly, whose forehead is marked with a tilak of sandal paste and musk, who is splendid with the earrings like 2 rising suns, whose perspiration anointed cheeks are like 2 glistening mirrors, who with raised eyebrows playfully glances at his beloved's face, who is, of course, Sri Radha, Radharani, the tip of whose graceful raised nose is decorated with a glistening pearl, whose bimba fruit lips are splendid in the moonlight of his teeth, whose hands are splendid with bracelets, armlets, and jewel rings, who holds a flute in his left lotus hand, whose waist is splendid with a graceful belt, whose feet are splendid with graceful anklets, whose eyes are restless with the nectar of amorous pastimes, who jokes with his beloved, making her laugh again and again, and who stays with her on the jeweled throne under a kalpa vriksha, or wish-fulfilling tree in Vrindavan. In this way, one should meditate on Lord Krishna and Sri Radha. That is the ultimate meditation. When we come before the deities of Sri Radha, and when we chant the Hare Krishna mantra or the other holy names of the Lord. And when we do this, we should understand one thing, that though we're simply sitting here, we should feel ourselves zooming right out of this material world. We should feel ourselves zooming right back to the material realm. That's the purpose of the temple. That's the purpose of understanding these pastimes of Lord Krishna, the qualities and nature of Lord Krishna, so that we can spiritualize our consciousness and ultimately return, attaining the final form of liberation, going back to Krishna's spiritual abode. That is the means by which we meditate on Sri Radha and Krishna and how we can reach their spiritual abode. So thank you very much. I hope you liked that little presentation. And now I think we have more of the program to continue with. And I will let our presenters carry on with that. So once again, thank you very much for having me. Hopefully sometime I can come back again and give you more knowledge and information.
Thank you so much, Nanda Anandaji. He's a spiritual soul, realized soul, has passed the Vedic knowledge to many souls and has written many books, and he has his Guru Kripa. So he's got all the grace and he's been doing this for his whole lifetime. And I have heard that he has written many books on Vedas, Puranas, Upanishads. So you can look at his website. His name is Nanda Anandaji. He's the head of ISKCON.